Hey, everybody, this is TJR.
And this is Robert Gensler.
And 2 months ago, saw the release of the Beatles Red and Blue album remixes. The remixes that some are referring to as the remixes that nobody asked for, but that we got nonetheless. And at the end of that video, I had asked, what do you think of getting together in a couple of months and just discussing and seeing how we feel now that we've lived with it for a while? Because we only got to listen to them for about 24 hours max,
Right.
before we could get together. And the funny thing that happened along the way, a funny thing happened on the way to the forum, so to speak. You had originally reached out to your contacts at Universal Music and had asked them, could you please let us have access to an advanced stream? You didn't even ask for an advanced copy because, you've said to me, record labels just don't like sending promos anymore.
Yeah.
They mainly provide you with a stream, and that would have been great if that way we could have lived with it a little longer and had our video out the day it was released versus maybe a day later or so. The funny thing that happened is that sometime after our video was out there, we both got a copy of this.
Right, we did.
Yeah. And this was the slipcase set with both the red and the blue albums in them. Right. And we both were sent this. And, we'd already put out our review, but Universal Music, thank you very much. You. We do appreciate it a great deal. Mm-hmm. And so we thought we would get back together now that we've had these for a little while and listened, and just kind of see where our thoughts are with them. Have any of our thoughts changed? The things we've noticed we didn't notice before. And so we're probably going to talk more about the red album, obviously, than the blue, because the red, the majority of this was remixed. The majority of this was already remixed off of the previous releases, with only a few new tracks, a few new remixes for this set here. So, Robert, I'm going to let you kind of just start and just
okay. And you set and TJ, you set the stage really well. But some things never change, and I really mean this. Case in point is that the Beatles have always been my favorite artist, and I know I'm not alone in saying that. They are rightly celebrated as the greatest and most influential artists to emerge in the rock era, and they can continue to blow me away. And boy, these new editions of the Red and Blue album definitely reminded me of why I just love this band so much. And they also provide us a great opportunity to hear some of these songs we've heard countless times in a new way. And I really want to thank Peter Jackson and Giles Martin for what they've done.
Sam O'Kell, all of them,
yeah, exactly, and all the powers that be that kind of made this happen. And like I think you mentioned in our previous video, Paul, Ringo, and Yoko, and George Harrison. Wife had to all approve these mixes, and I think by and large, we're both very excited by what we've heard here. And so what I'm going to do is, and I know you're probably going to do the same, is just talk about a few of the tracks and how they really impressed me, and if there's some negative things, we can talk about that too.
Sure.
But let's start with "Love Me Do." I simply can't believe, listening to this, that it was recorded more than 60 years ago. As you just hear everything here in a way that you can't believe the recording is that old. John's harmonica playing is just right there in your face, and Paul's bass is so immediate. Just listening to it, in many ways, it was almost like I was hearing the track for the first time. Really, really impressed me. A couple more that I want to highlight. I saw her standing there. It's pure perfection here. I thought the remix is great. Paul's voice and bass playing is amazing, and the harmonies really shine on here in ways where they just really, they just intermingle with the instruments. And I know I said it when we talked a couple months ago, Ringo's drumming, I think, is the most prominent enhancement that you hear on these remixes. And I never remember, growing up when I was first listening to the Beatles, that you could hear Ringo's drumming that well. Boy, you hear his drumming here in every hit. A Hard Day's Night. that initial chord that rings out. Wow. It's so amazing. And then there's just an overall drive too. Like you find yourself tapping along. Just, it's just amazing what they've done with these songs.
Yeah. And I'm going to comment on that one. There has been a lot of commentary about the bongos being too overbearing. Honestly, I don't feel like the bongos like overpowered the song or anything. I honestly don't feel that at all. But one thing I will say is I definitely agree that opening down that chord at the beginning, it hit me so much more powerfully. And after I listened to it a few more times, I realized something about it. They added a drum hit, or the drum hit was always there and now you hear it. I've seen and read about how they overdubbed like probably 3 or 4 guitars on top of each other to create that opening chord. But there's also, bang, a drum hit now too, if you listen carefully. And that's why it has so much more impact and power. I didn't even realize it at first, but that's the reason why. And of course, just the tremendous separation on the instruments. But that was all I wanted to say on that one. But please continue with yours.
Yeah, no. And the last song I really wanted to highlight is Yesterday. And I know you may very well want to talk about that too, but just, it's amazing when you listen to the strings on this. I mean, and Paul, how you hear like his fingers on the guitar neck and just the immediacy of it. I mean, it's like you're literally in the studio at Abbey Road sitting next to him and you can hear, they're putting the mic to the instruments into his voice and it's being tracked, but it's like, because we both have been in the studio, TJ, it's like you're hearing the other little things that are going on too. The things that you would maybe understandably would hear today with all the amazing technology. But these recordings were made back at, the dawn of the 60s, basically. And it's just phenomenal. And it's very exciting because obviously the songs haven't been altered in a way that's negative. They've just brought out certain things, I think, to make it a more lush and sumptuous listen.
I remember 2 months ago when we talked about Yesterday, that was one of the songs that really surprised me because I thought, how much can you do? It's such a sparse arrangement. But just like you said, the string instruments all separated.
Right.
And just hearing each one individually, what they're doing, how they're interacting with each other musically. And like you said, Paul's acoustic guitar, I can feel his fingers scratching against the strings. And I know that probably sounds crazy to some people. And I'm used to hearing it on more modern recordings. Once, in the 70s and 80s, as recording technology improved, it was you got used to hearing those little tonalities that were created when the hand moves across an acoustic fretboard. And a lot of us don't notice that, but it does create a tonality that's there in the recordings, but it really wasn't as present in this recording because of the primitiveness of the technology at that time. And like I said, all this has been brought out, and it just makes it feel more real, like it's really there.
Exactly.
And so definitely, I agree with you. If anything else, these remixes reinforced to me why, for so long, the mono mixes were so preferable, especially for the early Beatles albums, because of the extreme separation that existed with them. That hearing it in mono together like this, it was just better balanced, especially when you listen on headphones. Just
and I think you've mentioned it before, TJ, too. The Beatles were really involved with the mono mixes, and then they kind of, I think for the most part, and obviously you may correct me, someone else will, but my understanding is the Beatles weren't often even there when they did the stereo mixes in the early days. So, they were so the mono mixes really more represented their vision and probably the vision of what they achieved with George Martin. Yeah. But I think that what we're hearing now, I think the Beatles, well, we know Ringo and Paul are obviously impressed with them, but I think they would be very happy with what we're hearing on the Red and the Blue album 2023 editions.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree, because I think it's really giving us a better idea of what they've sounded like in the studio. If you were sitting there and listening to them, because so much of the early stuff was mostly tracked live. As far as their involvement in the earliest days, there was kind of this separation between the guys in the suits inside the control room and them. But as the years kept going, more and more, it was like, oh, we're in the booth too as well, and we're concerned with how it's all being put together too. But you are correct. The stereo was a niche market for a lot longer in England than it was in the US. And so it was just an afterthought. And sometimes George Martin wasn't even involved. Sometimes he was, sometimes he wasn't. So yeah, the stereo mixes that we're used to here in the US for decades that we were used to were kind of just afterthoughts versus the mono mixes. And as I said before, if anything else, these remixes just reinforce why the mono mixes were so much more preferable than the stereo mixes, especially with the earliest of the albums, pre-Sgt. Pepper. And even Sgt. Pepper, I think, is better in mono than its original stereo, in my opinion. As you get past that, your opinions may vary. Everybody's opinions may vary, but mostly, yeah, people prefer the mono. But I remember when this was announced, I've always kind of wondered about the early albums. How much can they really give us with a remix? Because it was all so sparse and primitive, especially the earliest stuff. And the answer is quite a bit.
Yeah.
After hearing this, as for me, a couple additional observations that I wanted to make in regards to the Red, and these are just tiny little things, and they're the kind of things that only us music nerds get excited about. On I Feel Fine, beyond, of course, the fact that it's just so much fuller sounding, that it's a joy to hear it in stereo, is at the ending as it's fading out. She's in love with me and I feel fine. Do, 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 ooh. All of that. There's this little, I don't know if it's a percussive effect or a dog barking, but there's this kind of almost like a swooshing noise. If it was a modern record, I would think it was LP scratching, but it might have just been a dog barking in the background for all I know. Because I thought, it could have been a dog. It was just kind of a sound and a swooshing sound. And when I listened to it, I thought, wait a minute, was that ever there before? I don't remember hearing that. I went back to the original stereo mix. It's there, but it's so deep into the fade out, you almost wouldn't notice it. And I never noticed it till now.
Yeah.
So just a weird little thing I thought I'd bring up. You brought up a lot of the things that I wanted to talk about already, but one I will bring up is on If I Needed Someone. When I first heard it, I said, I didn't hear anything new, but I heard it with such a level of clarity that it was like hearing it for the first time. But I didn't compare it to the original stereo mix. Since this is stereo, I thought, well, let's compare it to stereo. And I did compare it to the original stereo mix. And in the original stereo mix, the bass feels buried by comparison on the original. On this new version, the bass sounds very set free. The whole track feels set free by comparison. And I always enjoyed the track. But I remember I said 2 months ago, now I really, really like it. Another observation that I will bring up is Nowhere Man, which I know you talked about a moment ago. I was going to intrude, but you were just on such a good roll, I didn't want to. But with Nowhere Man, I said pretty much the same thing. It was everything I could have wanted from a solid stereo remix of it. As compared to its original stereo mix. Didn't hear anything new, but it felt like I was hearing it for the first time. I went and compared it to the original stereo mix and still felt very strongly about it. But I also compared it, because it's available, I compared it to the Yellow Submarine soundtrack remix by Peter, and hopefully I say his last name right, Peter Cobbin. Hopefully I say that right. I actually compared them. Still, I'm not knocking this remix. I think it's really good for clarity, but I felt like the Peter Cobbin remix had a lot more sparkle to it, and it was a bit more magical sounding. So I would recommend you and others to compare that. One thing I noticed after the fact was how much drier the opening a cappella section is. With them harmonizing, it's very dry. Even when compared to the original stereo mix, you hear more reverb on it, a little more color of sweetener on it, audio sweetener on it. And I'm not sure why they scaled that back. That was kind of a peculiar thing to me. But that's one of my, and I didn't want to say that's a negative, but that's one of the few things where I thought, okay, this could have been maybe a little better. Not that it wasn't good, but when you compare it to this one that was done, quite some time ago when they did the Yellow Submarine Songtrack album,
I think that was 1999. I think TJ, I think that was around 99 or so.
Late 90s. I was going to say late 90s.
Late 90s, yeah.
So yeah, we're talking like almost 20 years ago, 15 to 20 years ago, roughly.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that was like one thing where it's like, okay, I compared it to that, and I do hear a difference there between those two. But mostly I'm in agreement with you, Robert. Just I couldn't believe that I could appreciate the earlier Beatles so much more than I already did. I, of course, was always the type of person who was more in love with the later period, what I will call the blue period. Some of that bleeds into the red with Rubber Soul, and with Revolver, when their songwriting starts to mature and they really start to expand as their musical palette. And I think a lot of fans tend to feel that way. But now I'm appreciating this early stuff in a way that I never did before.
Yeah.
And I can't wait now for the early albums to get remixed.
Exactly. And there is, you're hearing them probably more fully than we have before. Like I said, people may, have little nitpicking things that they like or dislike or something like that. But overall, I think you're hearing these songs in a way you haven't been able to before. And that's, and just the power and energy and exuberance of the band really comes through.
And being nitpicky fans, that's part of the fun. Just comparing and contrasting and talking about all these little things. Don't take it too seriously.
Exactly.
It's part of the fun when you find these little things.
Keep all the as Beatle fans will do. They're going to keep all the previous versions and editions. They'll have them on CD and vinyl, and then that way, if you feel like one listening experience, you can get it this way, and if you want it another way, you can get it over there. So hopefully everybody will be happy.
Yeah. So is that all you wanted? That's all I wanted to cover on the red. Do you want to talk about the blue now?
The blue album, obviously, like we said, there's not as many new remixes that we haven't heard previously. I'll start off with, before we get to the elephant in the room that we discussed last time.
Yeah.
Really quickly, Magical Mystery Tour. I thought, I know you were the one that kind of pointed it out, and I listened for it, that distinctive rhythm guitar. There was that guitar I didn't remember hearing, just like you did, and it was really impressive. Just in the clarity and the depth of the mix to be able to hear that. And, I just found this just an incredible listen, cranking it up, and just, it sounds fantastic, just magical. I've always loved the song, but I think that I love it much more thanks to this remix than I did previously. Hey Bulldog, I know it's one of these great songs that I think has gained, even a stronger following and love over the years. And I think
agree. Yeah.
Just a great mix here. And boy, is it powerful, kind of like I just talked about with Magical Mystery Tour. I know that there's some complaints I saw in some of the other reviews about maybe how heavy the percussion was in the mix. I didn't find it detracted from me in my listening. I just think it's a really great remix and very powerful, and then the elephant in the room, like we've talked about, is I Am the Walrus with that finale.
No, before we talk about the elephant in the room,
okay,
let's save that for last. I want to just really quickly, I want to point out just one song on the Blue album. Actually, two. I apologize. Two. One is Revolution. And to me, the real revelatory moment was when I compared it to the original stereo mix, this new remix. In the original stereo mix, the opening guitar line is coming like this. And then the drums, boom, coming here on the other side. On this new stereo, of course, the lead guitar is slightly off center, but the drums are like behind me. Boom, like that opening hit. Yeah. And boy, does it hit like you want it to. Like it's a heavy rock song. And the drums have so much power. And it's so propulsive. And it's coming from behind you and pushing forward. And once again, you listen to it, oh, that sounds good. But then you compare it to the original stereo mix and you go, wow, they really improved this a lot. and you really feel it. So that's the first one I wanted to mention. The second one is one that you talked about, Old Brown Shoe, where you said it was one of the ones you weren't as excited about. And I remember what excited me about that one was the delineation of Paul's bass. There was these bass licks that he was doing that were always there, but I wasn't really hearing them. And now suddenly like, oh, that's really cool what Paul's doing right there. I really like that. And I listened to it again, of course, and I listened to the original stereo mix. And what I found out was that in the original stereo mix, George's vocal feels kind of buried off to one side. And when I listen to it here, sadly, it still feels like it's off to one side a bit. And so while I've enjoyed the new mix and I've enjoyed hearing Paul's bass line, I just don't understand why George's vocal still feels like it's kind of over here in the background somewhere. I don't know why they didn't bring that up more centered.
Yeah, it's too far.
Criticism.
It's not up front. Yeah, like some of these mixes we've been talking about, remixes, boy, the vocals have never sounded more vivid. You hear everything. And yeah, that I don't know why it is with that. I don't know if it's weakness in the original recording or how he was mic'd, or we don't know. But yeah, I wish it was a little bit stronger.
Yeah. So many of these, like I said, have been improved by just getting the drums more centered. And instead of having a vocal come at you like this, it's coming at you like this, or coming at you like this. And so many of these have been improved just by those simple changes, So I don't understand why this one couldn't be done. I'm going to have to assume, like you said, it's something about a weakness in the recording.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. But overall, it's great to have it here, but it's, I mean, we're being very nitpicky here, I think.
We are, and that's our job.
That's
because
right.
we're fans.
That's right.
So
now, now we'll
talk about the elephant in the room.
Okay. As we talked about 2 months ago, I said I was going to go back and listen to I Am the Walrus carefully, repeatedly. And, this is where I've come to, TJ, and I'm anxious to hear your thoughts. I think that the mix it sounds strong. The ending is dramatically different than what we're used to hearing. So I'm just going to have to say, if I feel like hearing that original ending, I'm just not going to find it here. I see that Giles Martin obviously was trying to do something to make the song sound as good as it can. And I think a lot of fans are going to appreciate that, but also might be a little bit disappointed that it's not all the notes and all the voiceovers and all the talking and all the tracks that they hear at the end there that are kind of embedded in your memory.
And you're right. And opinions are all over the map on this one.
They are.
From, hey, I really like this, it's great, to they crossed a line. 2 months ago when we talked about it, I said that I Am the Walrus is one of those songs that actually benefits from the extreme panning of those original stereo mixes. It actually helps make it sound weirder, especially those opening violins that come in at the beginning, that come in at one side. Hearing it more centered took away some of the weirdness for me. As I've listened to it, I feel that at the end of the day, I prefer the original mix. But I don't hate this remix. It does have some interesting aspects to it. And I will visit it sometimes. But overall, I just prefer the original. And the nice thing about all of this, it's not like George Lucas with Star Wars. We have the original stereo mixes. When you go to Tidal or any other streaming service, the original mixes are there. The remixes are there too. It's not going away. It's all there for you to enjoy. And so I feel really good about that. And so I'm not really that worried about it. It was an interesting thing, and obviously, Paul and Ringo and the estates of Harrison and John Lennon were okay with it.
Yeah.
Obviously they liked it. So there you go.
I think you said it very well. It's just another color on the palette. It's just, it's another way to listen and experience the Beatles magic, so I think it's one of, like you said, it's not so radically different that it's, that you're going to get out your pitchfork, so
Some people are.
Yeah. So yeah. So
yeah, but just remember the originals.
Yeah.
Not going anywhere. They're still there.
Yeah.
Don't worry. With that all said, any thoughts since we first listened to the new song, which of course is actually now included on this release here, on this new Blue Album release, the new song Now and Then. Any thoughts on how you feel about it now versus then, so to speak?
The only thing is that when it, when I was listening, to the Blue Album and it comes on, you're like, oh yeah, that's the new song, and it's a little jarring because you know that it's not something that the Beatles recorded, back in the 1960s. It's been completed, in 2023. So,
yeah.
But am I glad they included it? At the end of the day, I guess I am, because it does, obviously all four of the Beatles are on it, even though, like I think I discussed before, I hear it more kind of as a John Lennon solo track that the other Beatles kind of came in and embellished with their great talents. I think it's an amazing achievement of technology, though. Like we said, TJ, it's just amazing what they can do today.
I have grown to love it more. I liked it initially. I really did. I had some I had some problems with the video, but that's not the song. That's the video. Yeah. But the song I like, but I've grown to love the song even more. But I agree with you. It still feels to me more like a John Lennon song, where the other Beatles came in and embellished on it and elevated it as a result. But I really am loving it more and more and more. I love its whole melancholy feel to it. One other question here. If you could be in charge of things, is there a song that you think should have been included, since they did expand these sets to include more songs? Is there anything that you think was left out? And this is all just fun, nitpicky stuff.
Yeah.
But is there anything you would have included?
I'm not going to be the first one to say it, but I think Rain is the big track, because it's the one that Ringo is the most proud of, and I agree with him. It's just a spectacular. It's very experimental, but it's very listenable. It's just a great track. Matter of fact, I know you and I have talked about possibly doing a video sometime about songs that maybe were under the radar, classic rock songs that deserve to possibly be big hits in the here and now. I would put Rain in that category if the Beatles had a entry into that hypothetical world. Like, hey, what's a song that if you could go back in time, hey, let's release that as a single, maybe it would be this. That's just a great song, and it would be nice to have seen that on the collection.
I would not argue with you on that one at all. Would not argue that one at all. No. As for me, there was a real attempt to right certain wrongs with these expanded editions. More tracks from Rubber Soul on the Red Album, and more tracks from George Harrison. Right. And they included the remake of Roll Over Beethoven, which George Harrison sings lead vocals on. But I would actually think they should have included his first original song off of With the Beatles, Don't Bother Me, which is a great song. I mean, that was his first song, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic song. Yeah.
Yeah, and that should have been included. That would have been my choice. Rather than have Roll Over Beethoven, put that there instead. But, hey, that's just us. That's our little...
Maybe. So these are the 50th anniversary editions. Maybe the 75th anniversary editions, they'll do that, Teach.
I'm sure they'll consult us on it. I'm sure that's going to happen.
If I'm still around then.
I'm waiting for the call. Hello, Paul. Anyways, but there we go. Yeah. Okay. So that's 2 months later. And now, please share with us your thoughts. 2 months later, what do you think? Do you still feel the same way? Are there some things you've changed your mind on? Do you think there should have been certain tracks versus others? Let it all out. This is what this is about. It's about having fun with this stuff and just sharing our thoughts and sharing our opinions and even our nitpicks. Let's just go to town with this stuff and have fun. We're fans. This is what we do. Okay. Anyways, though, Robert, thank you so much. This was fun. And I'll be looking forward to doing some more videos with you in the near future. Stay tuned for that. Everybody, thank you so much for watching, clicking like, clicking subscribe, and thank you for watching the last 6 weeks where I was doing Weekend Spin. And I've got a playlist link for you all. Thank you, patrons, for all that you do. Patron supporters do get exclusive weekly videos not available on this channel. And everybody, will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.